So, in my last video, I talked about these rumours that have emerged about Red Bull potentially having this component on their car, which is a cheat. And if that is true, none of Max Verstappen's World Championships are valid. In this video, I'm going to explore that a bit more and actually expose a few more things relating to it. Those of you who have been with the channel for a long period of time know that I try to avoid getting involved in talking about all the latest one after the other controversies that keep getting thrown up in the sport of Formula One. And the reason being, there is no point in engaging with many of them because it's just a show. Okay, this channel has been purposely created to expose the true level of corruption about the Abu Dhabi 2021 Grand Prix. A global fraud which has never been exposed in a true manner in any of the world's media. And it is being exposed here, it is being evidenced, and if you've not seen the other videos with the evidence, stay tuned because there's a lot more to come on it and a lot more evidence that will be presented. And once it's all been presented, action will be taken. Action will be taken. But the thing is, what's happened to us all is since that 2021 fix, we have been presented with this narrative. We've had thrust in our faces this notion that we are witnessing greatness. We are witnessing the best thing that we've ever seen. Okay? It's a narrative. It's not true. Those of us that actually know what we're looking at know that it's not true. And when we start, we don't have evidence of the cheating in us in as much that we don't have access to that Red Bull car to be able to scrutinize it and say, here is this component that is illegal in terms of the regulations of the sport because it performs this function which is illegal. We don't have access to that. So we can't evidence it. But what we can go on is we can go on what has happened, we can go on what we see, and we can draw our own conclusions from that. So, bear in mind with this video, I cannot provide you with evidence of Red Bull cheating, but I can show you what is going on. I'm going to show you what the rules actually state and that they aren't ambiguous in any way. This notion of loopholes, grey areas that we constantly get presented with as validation for excusing wrongdoing, we need to ignore that notion because it's completely wrong. Completely wrong. And I'm going to go through the regulations and show you. But I'm sick and tired of being fed a narrative. I'm sick and tired of having them thrust it in our face that we are watching this new champion that's amazing. It's not true. If he has been competing with a driver aid, then well, that's illegal. You compete if you need an assistance, well, that's not your ability, is it? That's not your ability as a driver that's winning you Grand Prix. It's the assistance you're getting from an illegal device that's assisting you to lap your car faster than everybody else. Well, that's not greatness. That's far from greatness. That's the opposite of greatness. So I'm going to just go through a number of things with you. Now, before I do, I just need to highlight a few of the dynamics that we are constantly facing with the situation. So that video has had, it says on here, 34,000 views when I last refreshed this screen. And that video, the YouTube gives you the statistics of likes versus dislikes. And so 87.9% likes to that video, which means there were 226 people that didn't like it. 226 people didn't like that there was information that was questioning Max Verstappen. This is what we have in this world. We have people that aren't willing to accept information or assess validity of information. They are desire driven. Okay, essentially, they are able to say, I like Max Verstappen. If I hear anything which is in some way exposing that Max Verstappen's not the great thing that I want him to be, then I don't like it. Okay, that is them. That is their commitment to this thing that they've invested their emotion in. They don't have the ability to look at it, look at the what is being presented, assess whether or not it's likely to be valid or not, and then adjust their position. See, back in the 90s, I started watching Formula One in the 80s, but back when I was watching in the 90s, Nigel Mansell at the time was driving a Williams that had active suspension and a Renault V10 engine, and that car was being described as being the most technologically advanced on the grid with the best engine. And Nigel Mansell won the first 4 races of the season and ended up becoming world champion that year. The commentators weren't telling the whole world that, oh, you're all watching the best driver, the best Formula One driver you've ever seen. No, they weren't doing that. And the reason that they weren't doing that, there was a guy called Fangio that had got 5 titles already from way back. And there were loads of drivers that had got 3 titles. And, Nigel Mansell was in the process of winning his first. We didn't get the hype job. We didn't get the narrative of everybody, you are now watching the greatest. No, they were telling us, well, this is the car. Yeah, Nigel Mansell, is a decent enough driver. Don't get me wrong. You've still got to get the job done. But you can't go comparing him with the greatest ever when you know that he's got a machine that is head and shoulders above everything else. So enough of the narrative. The Max Verstappen fanboys, these teenage wank boys that they've now attracted to the sport that don't know anything because they don't really know. They play a few computer games and they think that they themselves know everything there is to know. They've watched a few episodes of Drive to Survive and they listen to what they want to listen to. And there's plenty of places out there, such as the likes of Cameron F1 and all these other fluff channels that just basically just want to big up Max Verstappen and fluff Max Verstappen just because it gets them clicks. They make money off of, oh, look, everybody, look how great Max Verstappen is. Goat, all these kind of thumbnails where it's goat, with a question mark, and all the strap on fanboys, they're loving that. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I've been watching the sport for a long period of time, and what I see in Max Verstappen is not great driving. It's far from it. Far from it. You've heard me state many times on this channel, I acknowledge that he has the ability to lap a fast car around a racetrack, and he has the ability to do that continually. Okay? So yes, he has talent to do that, but that's not what Formula One motor racing is. Okay, if you want to be a time trialist, yeah, then Max Verstappen would be very good at that. But when have got to race other vehicles, equivalent spec vehicles or roughly equivalent vehicles that comply with the regulations of the sport, vehicles which don't have driving aids, okay, then Max Verstappen isn't a good driver. Okay, let that sink in. When you have to compete in motorsport, when you're racing other competitors wheel to wheel, and when your car doesn't have driving aids, Max Verstappen isn't a good driver. And I'm going to demonstrate that in this video. But what we are up against is that those desire-driven individuals will believe these pathological liars who will feed them with what it is they believe they know. The likes of Horner, Newey, Wheatley, people who cheat and who lie. But what's worse than that is that the sport's governing body, the government of the sport, cheat and lie too. Let that sink in. They are categorically corrupt. And if you have a problem with me saying that, the FIA, come at me. If you think that I am saying something that is libelous, take me to court. I will beat you because you are corrupt, you are criminals, you are fraudulent. I can categorically prove it, So take me to court if you think that what I am saying about you is libelous. Sadly, we are watching a so-called sport that isn't authentic. It is contrived, and the rules are not being applied fairly to all competitors within that sport. That's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. And until this corrupt regime is eradicated, there is no point in investing time and emotion in it, because they are contriving outcomes within the sport. If Red Bull are guilty of using an illegal component, all of the results that they have obtained using it need to be wiped out. That's all of them that they've used that component this season. And essentially, if it can be proven with telemetry, which it can be, that they were operating that last season, well, last season's results and 2022's all need wiping out. Hence, Max Verstappen is a 0-time world champion. So let's get into this. In my last video, I went through Tactical Rab's original video about the allegations, the rumours that Red Bull were using this illegal component in their braking system. He's done a follow-up video, Red Bull respond to brake cheating allegations. And the headline, the thumbnail there is not true. An 18-minute video that I encourage you all to go and watch on his channel. I'm just going to pick out a couple of sections of that and we'll go through them, and I'm going to go through the regulations and I'm going to show you the regulations from the FIA, and I'm going to give you an example which I hope clarifies everything for you to enable you to see what the situation is and how that impacts Max Verstappen's driving, and therefore this notion of his greatness, this narrative that we are being fed about Max Verstappen. So here we go with the intro of his video.
Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. A major update today on the big drama of this summer break so far. The Red Bull brake bias, inertial valve, cheating potential situation we've talked about over the last few days. Now it's being picked up by more areas of the media. Craig Scarborough, a very talented engineer in the space of Formula 1 for many years, coming up with his perception on exactly what Red Bull might have done to gain a major advantage. His belief is that if they were doing this, it would potentially have given them a major tyre preservation advantage, which of course is what we saw in reality. It seems to have Red Bull over the last couple of seasons. Does this explain the situation? Does this qualify as cheating given the grey area of these regulations? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Those who've been
Okay. The thing that I'll talk about these channels, and like I say, I don't want to be critical of this lad. Fair play to him for revealing it in this manner, because many won't. They ask for your opinion. They put it out there in the manner, is this cheating? Is this a grey area? Is this a loophole? No, it's not. We can all go through the regulations, which I'm going to go through with you, and I'll show you what they mean. They're very simple, and it's not a question. So we can categorically state, if this is what they are doing, they are categorically cheating and need to be disqualified for cheating. Okay, I'm going to take you through some. We'll skip to the bit where he's talking more about what this device is supposed to be doing. Okay, we're going to let him talk about what he needs to talk about in relation to this rumoured Red Bull cheat. I would advise you to watch the rest on his channel, because I'm only going to go through some of this, and then I'm going to go through the regulations with you, and also an example which I hope clarifies things for you all.
But let's talk about this situation, because we talked about this a while ago now on the rumours as to the performance that Red Bull had and then subsequently lost over the last few rounds. Now, there's still a question on this, and I don't think it's a question that has a clear-cut answer as to whether Red Bull regressed, whether other teams made progress, or exactly what the balance of that was. From my eyes, what my eyes are telling me is that the Red Bull car we see today is not the same car we saw at the start of the season.
If we look at the dominance of the Red Bull car over 2022, 2023, and the first 5 rounds of 2024, well, we thought we were in for another season of Red Bull domination. That Red Bull car started head and shoulders above the field in this season, it also is able to develop that car in the same way that every other team is. So it also can get performance gains on where it already started. Doesn't appear to have done that. And for the other teams to have caught that gap that Red Bull had at the start of the season, well, that is significant development. And we don't see those levels of development. We didn't see it in 2022. We didn't see it in 2023. So we all know what we see.
I don't have any groundbreaking evidence and data to back that up, but it's more anecdotal. It's on what the drivers have said. Verstappen now complaining of balance and understeer in the car, especially. Helmut Marko saying the balance isn't the same as it was at the start of the season. And sure, while Red Bull themselves are not going to come out and say, oh,
remember, understeer is when you put in a steering input and the car doesn't track round that expected trajectory. The car carries on in a straight line. Okay, that's what understeer is. And we're going to go through an example later on in this video that's going to demonstrate that.
oh yeah, we had to change XYZ because the FIA told us to. Obviously, maybe you can read between the lines to some degree. Just wanting to share again, really, this was the performance advantage of Verstappen compared to the field in the sprint race of the Chinese Grand Prix. This is his advantage compared to Mercedes, compared to Ferrari, compared to McLaren. You're telling me that this gap vanished basically overnight, and that McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes all closed that gap in the matter of a race or two? I don't personally buy it, because this was Spa, for example, a race that, let's not forget, Verstappen and Red Bull have dominated over the last couple of years. Verstappen here in 2022 was mind-bogglingly fast. He just absolutely scythed through the field with no problem at all. Effectively the same happened last year as well. This year was not the same story. Hamilton on average was the fastest man on track, then Piastri, then Verstappen, then Leclerc. So people have been looking for some sort of explanation as to how what we've had over the last 7 rounds has been some of the best racing in Formula 1 in a very long time, with 4 different teams able to fight for race wins. Certainly if you go back and include Monaco as well, where Ferrari and Charles Leclerc won, and over the last few rounds multiple different teams have won races, multiple different drivers have won races. It's been great to watch. Nothing like last year where Verstappen was winning every single weekend.
But they tell us that we were watching the best driver we've ever seen, and in this genius Adrian Newey designed car. That straight line speed that car had was ridiculous as well. So this device, if it is true that they've got this braking device, that's going to help your cornering speed. It's not going to help your straight line speed. And the straight line speed of that Red Bull, as soon as it got within DRS range, well, it obviously closed to within DRS range of every other car very quickly anyway, but then it just blitzed past the other cars. It didn't even need to outbrake its competitors, because it was that far ahead, always down the straight. Even halfway down a straight, the Red Bull had passed the car. It didn't need to slipstream. It didn't need the use of DRS to then outbrake it by being alongside it into the braking zone for a corner and outbrake it. Them type of overtakes weren't necessary. That car was that fast. So already it's got the straight line advantage. So that is generally down to engine power. Okay, that is down to engine power. But this device that they're saying is a cheap device, which, if it's true, is a cheap device, helps cornering speed. And this is what we're going to be talking about.
So, we talked yesterday about this story where sources were telling Racing News 365 of this, what they called an inertial valve in the braking system to allow for asymmetric braking at the rear of the car. This is something that, it's not like a new discovery, right? We always talk about this in Formula 1, the importance and also the kind of the cool factor of engineers.
This is the...
Right, I'm going to just pause this while this advert plays. Okay, here we go.
Engineers pushing the limits beyond what the FIA will potentially allow and into the grey areas. This is always a thing, and it's always going to be done, and I think it's cool for the sport, right?
This is something that we have been conditioned to believe and accept. And the reason being, the FIA do not say, you are cheating. You have broken the rules, you are cheating. Although, I can give you an example of when they do. When that involves a car driven by Lewis Hamilton, they will say it's cheating. They will say to the world, that this is a breach of the regulations, you have contravened them, and therefore this is your penalty. Back in 2022, when we heard this notion of flexible planks under the cars that Ferrari and Red Bull may be running because it's just a rumour, and then they introduced these new supposed anti-porpoising directives. Okay, that was how it was dressed up. They didn't disqualify anybody. They didn't send anybody to the back of the grid. They didn't expose to the world exactly what was going on. We just got the rumours, didn't we? And then they go, oh, well, we need to make an amendment, and all teams need to abide by this amendment. What's going on there? Because there are clear things in the rules, as I'm going to go through, which already cover this. And it's nothing to do with grey area, it's nothing to do with loophole, it's nothing to do with pushing the boundaries when there is a clear statement saying that you've got to have symmetrical forces going to those brakes. Anything else is a driver aid. If you are braking those wheels individually, independently, enabling different forces to go through the brakes on either side of the car, okay, that is a driver aid. Your car that you drive probably has electronic stability program. What that does is it brakes the wheels of your car independently based upon how that car's computer determines what is required to keep your car stable and prevent you from getting your car into trouble. That is what electronic stability program is. It's a driver aid. Essentially, if you have asymmetric braking on your car, that is what that car is delivering to the driver. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that later in the video. It's not a grey area. Formula One is a test of engineering skill, but driver skill. And they have removed the notion of driver aids. Hence, if your car has a driver aid, it is like riding a bike with the stabilizers on, or riding a bike with a little motor in the crank helping to propel you along. It's cheating. It's not a test of the competitor's skill. It is an aid. It is like going bowling and having the bumpers up. Okay? And smacking the bowling ball off the bumpers either side of the bowling alley and getting a strike. And the commentators telling the world that you're watching the best bowler that you've ever seen in the world. Well, no, that's not how it works. If you're using aids, if you're using assistance, it's not a reflection of your skill as a competitor. Anyway, we'll carry on with this video.
That's kind of the point of the sport in some regard, right? The innovation factor that's coming into play.
In accordance with the rules.
The fact that the engineers are always pushing the limits of what's possible.
No, let's not accept that. Them pushing the limits are pushing the scope of what is possible within the scope of those rules and regulations, not beyond them. As soon as you go beyond them, you're cheating.
But it's not like the idea of asymmetric braking. So when you press the brake pedal, the rules say that the same amount of force, magnitude of force, has to be applied to the wheels at either the front or the rear of the car. Now that magnitude can be different depending on the front or the rear axle, but between the left and the right side.
So that's the notion of brake bias, and that is the same on road cars as well. On a road car, your front brake discs are bigger than your rear brake discs. Okay, if you had a stronger braking force on the back end of the car than the front, then what you're going to get is an imbalance and you're going to get instability under braking. So this is the same on a Formula One car, that the brake balance, the bias, the difference in force between the brakes on the front of the car and the back of the car are different. And what you have at your disposal is the ability to adjust that bias. What is the difference between the braking force at the front of the car and the braking force at the back of the car, and you can adjust the level of the braking force at the rear of the car so that you can best balance your car for any given circuit or any style of driving. So that is an adjustable feature on a Formula One car. However, on the front axle, when you've got your front wheels, the front right and the front left tyre, so front right and left wheels, the force going through each of those brakes has to be the same. And on the rear, the left rear and the right rear, the force going through those brakes has to be the same. The difference can be different from front to back. But that is within the rules and regulations. That's to help with drivability of the car.
It must be the same. That's the rule, although Red Bull had a different interpretation of that rule.
There is no different interpretation of that rule. There is no different interpretation of that rule. There is no validity to it.
Which has now had to be clarified, as we'll get into here in a second.
So rather than be struck, and rather than say you've broken the rule, the FIA say, oh, we now have to clarify the rule. No, if you've broken it, you've broken it. If you've done something wrong, you've done something wrong. You've just gone and stabbed somebody. Oh, we now have to clarify that you're not allowed to get a knife and stick it in somebody because you didn't realise whether that constituted stabbing somebody, did you? You'd got a different interpretation. Is that how it works, is it? Unbelievable.
Now, asymmetric braking has been played around with for years, because if you can brake each tyre independently, you can gain a significant advantage through the corners, on the exit of the corners, in terms of balance, and also in terms of tyre wear as well, because naturally as you're turning through a corner, ideally you want every single tyre to be able to have its own exact, very precise amount of braking applied to the tyre, because, you know, less slippage and stuff like this to preserve the tyres even better. I think to me, over the last couple of years, that was the standout feature of the Red Bull, was that the degradation just didn't seem to be there. Like, they were able to maintain their tyres so much longer than anybody else, and it just felt to me that there was something going on there. And this...
Okay, I'm going to try and give you an example that I hope that you can all find relatable. So what you said there is good, but I'm going to hopefully enhance on that and give you an example that makes it easier for you to understand exactly what the technicalities are of what's going on. He's going to talk about Peter Windsor now. Now, Peter Windsor is also a fluffer, okay? Is presented as an expert, has got a YouTube channel with about 170 odd, maybe more now, subscribers to it, because they think that they're getting authentic information from Peter Windsor, and now he's got his chum Cameron F1 who he's teamed up with, and they just fluff Max Verstappen. And Cameron himself will tell you just what an incredible driver Max Verstappen is. Now, if that's what you want to hear, if you want to hear just how amazing Max Verstappen is, go over to see Cameron F1 and subscribe there. This isn't the channel for you. This channel is exposing the fraud of Abu Dhabi 2021, and that's what the focus of my future videos are going to be. But this needs exposing at this moment in time, because nobody else is in the media, and I'm going to come to that shortly as well. I'm going to pick it up here where he's talking about that. You remember the Melbourne Grand Prix where Max Verstappen had that retirement due to a braking problem, and as he went into the pits at the end of them, he was only out on track for a couple of laps, wasn't he? And as he went into the pits, that brake seemed to explode and propel some metal thing into the side barrier. Okay, extremely dangerous that was. But they were saying, is this likely to be linked with that? And they were debating that or not. But what he's going to go into now is an engineer talking about what he thinks is most likely going on. So let's have a listen.
What may be accurate, though, is Craig Scarborough's interpretation. So, very knowledgeable, very capable engineer, and he gives his read on what this might be. This makes sense and is underlined by the tech regulation change, which we'll look at again in a second, a return of the Newey fiddle brake, but automatic and creating a turning moment with the rear brakes. There's even been some speculation as to whether after Newey departed, did he, like, tell on the team? I mean, I don't know, just a theory, right? But it was that weekend where Newey left the team, and then immediately in Miami and therefore beyond, the car hasn't been as good. So there's been some speculation onto exactly who informs the FIA, because if this is true, this what we're going to dive into in the coming seconds, which people are starting to see that it may well be. Certainly, this would explain many of the anecdotal things we've seen from Red Bull over the last couple of seasons. If it is true, then it would raise the question onto exactly how the FIA discovered it, why they...
Okay, how did they discover it? Makes you wonder. If this is concealed within a component, you don't know what the internals of that component are doing. What you should have is telemetry, though. Whether that will give you rotational speeds of wheels and whether you can detect it off that, again, without seeing the telemetry and what it exposes, difficult to say. But essentially, if we're looking at this diagram, the one on the left hand side of the screen would be ideally, let me just see if I can just, there you go, that's got it up a little bit. When you depress the brake pedal, you force brake fluid through a pipe, and that brake fluid goes out to the brake calipers, and that pushes pistons out, compressing the brake pad against the brake disc. And it is that friction of the pad compressing against the disc that causes the car to slow down. All right, they basically grip onto those brake discs that are traveling around rotationally at the same speed as those wheels, okay? And you grip hold of them, you clamp onto them, and that slows the car down. That's how your brakes work. Now, with this yellow kind of bob in the middle, when the car is traveling in a straight line, so there's no forces essentially acting on that yellow bob in the middle, when you depress the brakes, then the passageway for that fluid to travel to both the right brake and the left brake is the same. So an equal amount of brake fluid goes to each of those brake calipers, so the braking force is the same to each of those rear wheels. When you look at the right hand side, it is explaining that when cornering, you experience G. Okay, you know yourself, when you go around a corner, then your body gets shunted over to one side of the car or the other, and you have to sometimes lean into these things. This is the way these things work. Now, when cornering, that yellow bob moves over to one side, and what that then does, it restricts the pathway for the brake fluid to travel to the one side of the brake. So one side of the car, the brake fluid going to the caliper is increased. The other side, it's decreased, so that it alters the braking force, because it alters the force with which these pistons are pushed out, pushing the brake pad against the brake disc. So it impacts the braking force across the axle. You get a different braking force to one side of the car to you do on the other. That's not allowed. That's illegal. The regulations state that that is illegal. Now I'm going to go back to his video and we'll play through what he's saying about it.
They decided to put this clarification in place, and who found out about this? Because it's not something you can see. The only way you'd be able to see it is if you took the car apart, or just looking at the characteristics of the car, which seems maybe too good to be true. I don't know, that's a theory, but effectively a way with a weighted valve in the rear brake splitter to alternate the effort between the calipers as the car turns. Just to quickly clarify, because a couple of guys pointed this out to me on exactly how they might have not misread, but read this ruling in a deliberate way such that it needed to be clarified, because the discussion is on the fact that the magnitude has to be applied on a given brake disc the same way. And a couple of guys are pointing out that because it says on a given brake disc rather than on the wheel, there might have been a way where they can apply the magnitude to the brake disc, but then have a mechanism in place that it actually provides a different magnitude to the wheel itself. And therefore, technically, that would not violate the way the regulation was written. A massive grey area, right? Because
that's utter bullshit, and I'm going to go through the regulations and demonstrate that. Okay, so I'm going to do that in a second, but firstly I'm going to give you an example. So many of us will have just recently watched the Olympic Games, and many of us will have watched the athletics competition. This is an example of the 400 meters sprint event. where they start in a staggered manner like this. Now, there's a reason that track length on the inside lane is 400 meters long. But if you ran around the outside lane from that start line through all the way around the outside of that track, on the outside of the track, you cover significantly longer than 400 meters. So I want you to focus on the athlete in lane 1 and the athlete in lane 3. Look at how far the athlete in lane 3 is ahead of the athlete in lane 1. That's probably 15 meters. Somewhere in that region, 15 meters. Let's say the athlete circled there with the blue vest on and the athlete with the all red on in lane 3. They both run the same distance of 400 meters, but the athlete in lane 3 has that start position because of the way this works, okay? Because of the stagger of the start, and the further you are away from that, the bigger the radius you run, and therefore this is the way you equate it to being 400 meters distance that you cover as you go around that track. Now you're a Formula 1 car. Now you're a Formula 1 car running in lane 1. But your Formula 1 car is 2 meters 2 meters wide. So your inside wheel is going to be on that inside curb. Your outside wheel is going to be in lane 3. However, you're starting that car on the start finish line. The outside wheel can't start in the athlete 3 position, can it? It has to start on the start line. So as that Formula 1 car travels around that 400-meter track, the inside wheel will travel 400 meters, the outside wheel will travel 415, 420 meters, whatever the distance that stagger is, because that is how much further it has to travel. So if it has to travel, let's say it's 415 meters that the outside wheel has to travel at the same time as the inside wheel traveling just 400 meters, it means the outside wheel has to go faster. It has to do more rotations. If you have brakes that are acting on those brake discs, which are traveling at the same speed as those wheels, and you apply a symmetrical force to brakes to brake discs, that are traveling at different speeds, what's going to happen? Are you going to get a symmetrical braking effect? No, you're not. Okay, you're going to get one of them brakes heat up a lot quicker. You're going to then potentially get it to, you might get expansion in the materials. You then might get it locking on. Okay, you might get increased wear. All of these things are possible. So the outer wheel, as it goes around a corner, and then we're aware that there's left and right turns in the course of a racetrack, but every time you go round a corner on a racetrack, the inside wheels will be going slower than the outside wheels. The outside wheels will have to cover more ground. You'll have to get more rotations of that outside wheel. We're told that in motor racing, you put your brakes on in a straight line. You do all of your slowing down in a straight line and you go around a corner. If you have the ability to control the brakes in such a manner that you can get asymmetric braking, you can brake later and you can go into a corner braking knowing that you're not going to lock up. You're going to be able to allow that car to rotate, because if you try to corner by putting the brakes on and then brakes are symmetrical, then you're trying to allow the outer the outer wheel to rotate faster than the inside one with the brakes on. Well, if you've got a symmetrical force, that's not going to happen, is it? So your car's not going to steer around that corner. It's going to want to track in a straight line. Yet if you've adjusted the force from the inside brake to the outside brake, increasing the force on the inside so that slows down the inside wheel a lot more than it does the outside wheel, allowing the outside wheel more rotations as you go around a corner, it affords you braking control into a corner. And it doesn't cause instability in your car, doesn't cause the locking up as much. You've got that driver assistance. You've got, essentially, it's what electronic stability program is giving you. But the brain of the car is not necessarily doing that. It just is doing it by the equivalent is being affected by that device. That's what's happened. That's why it's going to give you that advantage. Okay, that is hopefully it's an example that you can relate to. And I know we'll get the strap-on fanboy that will try to rubbish that example. But the purpose of me trying to use an athletics track is to show you that as a Formula One car goes around a corner, the outer wheels will have to travel further. And if you try to, and as I said to you, they tell us that you need to brake in a straight line. If you have the ability to brake later and you've still not got that car under full control to make it around that corner, so you remain on them brakes that bit longer, well, if you've got the ability to have asymmetric braking that allows your car the ability to rotate around that corner by facilitating those outer wheels to still move faster as you are cornering while still braking, that's an advantage. That is an advantage due to a driver aid. And that is the significance of this device. This is the benefit that it is going to give you as a driver. That is not insignificant. So if they describe this driver as being the best driver you've ever seen when he's got a car that's got that capability, well, that's not driver skill. That's not driver skill. That is the car facilitating driving of that manner. That's what that is. Because otherwise, the car will just lock up on you. Now, over the course of 2022 and 2023, we didn't really have to see Max Verstappen do the dive bomb style overtake because that car was already that much faster that, like I say, he was already ahead of his competitors before even having to go into the braking zone to even kind of put that maneuver in on people. But that's not to say that the car didn't have it. When you don't have it, let's see how your car is affected. And to do that, we'll have a look at the Hungarian Grand Prix incident, the collision caused by Max Verstappen, and we're going to have a look at Anthony Davidson's version of it. Now, let's make sure we've got this on the right playback speed. Yeah, okay, and we'll see. I'm going to try and play this to you in the best possible way. Hopefully, it's going to take a bit. It might take a few attempts at it, but let's try and have a look if we can do this. Okay, so I might have to rewind it to this. Let's have a look. Put it to silent. So, what you can see, Max Verstappen's steering wheel. So, although these front wheels look as though they're going in a straight line, they're not. Okay, he's put his steering input in, so he's trying to go around a curve. All right, meaning those inside tyres, the front right and rear right, will have to travel a shorter radius than the front left and rear left. Then tyres on the left hand side of the car will need to be travelling faster than the ones on the inside to make it around this turn, which he's now beginning this turn. Okay, now what do we see there? We saw this become stationary. Now this is at a quarter speed, but you can see the branding on those tyres. That's the one on the outside. That's the one that needs to rotate more than the one on the inside to make it around this curve. And yet that is the one that's the one that's locking up first. You see the smoke on the right hand side now, but what happened to the one that, well, you saw the blistering? Let's see if we can bring that back. Let's play it again. So you'll see in a second, right hand tyre, you can see a yellow line essentially. Right hand tyre, sorry, left hand tyre. I think I said that wrong. Right hand tyre, you can see a continuous yellow line. That's the branding of the tyre, but travelling around quite that fast that it looks like it's just a yellow strip, doesn't it? Look at the left hand tyre, and you can see the detail of the blistering on that left hand tyre. he's got the full lock on. And you can see that that has locked up. And it needs to be rotating faster than the inside tyre. So what's gone on? It's locked up. Now, that sort of thing, that valve that we're talking about, it prevents that from happening. And obviously we've got the impact that's thrown him up into the air. Now, if we go back, we'll go back again. And we'll look at the timings of this, because the outside tyre seems to lock before the inside one. And when you need to be turning your car, if you've got this device that you're used to, and so therefore you're not expecting to lock up, because you know that this device enables your car to rotate around this corner, brake so late that you can still corner, you can still turn, and it won't lock up on you. You're used to that, having that. You're used to driving and being able to brake so late and still turn the steering wheel and your car make it around a corner. But you remove that device and you now get symmetrical braking force, and you're trying to make that outer wheel that's now rotating faster because you're going around a corner, and you're hitting that with a symmetrical braking force as the inside one. Well, that's going to overheat, that's going to lock up, you're going to lock your brakes. And that one on the outside, that left-hand tyre, that's stopped now, hasn't it? That's locked up. Like I say, that's the one that should be travelling faster. That would indicate that at Hungary, that device isn't being used. Strange that, isn't it? And then we get the microseconds later, because this is at quarter speed, remember. When you see this at full speed, you can't really pick this out like that. But this is the sorts of things that's going on. This is the kind of impact it has on your ability to drive a car around a track. Now, I promise you, we will go through the regulations and prove that it's illegal. So this is the issue 6 of the F1 technical regulations. You can all see these on the FIA website. But this is the thing, the strap-on fanboy won't do that. The strap-on fanboy, they will go, oh, I like Max Verstappen. I like hearing things that tell me Max Verstappen is the GOAT. If somebody says otherwise, I don't like that. I'll hit the thumbs down and I will say that I don't like that in the comment section. That's all they've got. Rather than go away and educate themselves and determine for themselves whether something is true or not, they will decide whether they like it or not. And whether they like it or not determines whether it's true or not. You shouldn't be determining what is right or wrong based on what you like or don't like. Okay? History tells us that you shouldn't do that. Okay? I'm not going to give examples here. Anyway, this is issue 6. Now, when we look at this from the top, it gives us the general principles, regulatory framework, and then it gives you the contents essentially. We'll eventually go to section 11, which talks about the braking system. Okay, so this is the contents of here. We get to the braking system, brake circuits and pressure distribution. Okay, and that's on page 94, which we'll get down to there. Brake calipers, brake discs and pads, brake pressure modulation, liquid cooling, rear brake control system, and supply of brake friction and brake system hydraulic components. Okay, so it's all there in issue 6. But just before we get down to that far, let's just have a look at the general principles. And it tells you that the FIA will organise FIA Formula 1 World Championships. Okay, and all the participating parties undertake to apply as well as observe the rules governing the championship and must hold FIA super licenses, which are issued to drivers, competitors, officials, organisers and circuits. So if you are going to participate, you agree to comply with these regulations. Championship and each of its competitions are governed by the FIA in accordance with the regulations. In the sense of the regulations, terms referring to natural persons are applicable to any gender. Regulatory framework. The regulations applicable to the championship are the International Sporting Code, okay, the code, which I referred to when I'm talking about the purpose of the sporting regulations, the Formula One technical regulations, which is these, the Formula One sporting regulations, and the Formula One financial regulations. So you breach any of those, you've breached, you're cheating. Together referred to as the regulations. These regulations are issued by the FIA and apply to the whole calendar year referred to in the title and to the championship taking place within that calendar year. Any changes made by the FIA for safety reasons may come into effect without notice or delay. Okay, so if they determine that there's a safety issue, then they need to make an amendment, then that's something that they will make an amendment on. Okay, for safety reasons. The definitive text of the technical regulations shall be the English version, which will be used should any dispute arise as to their interpretation. Headings in this document are for ease of reference only and do not affect the meaning of the technical regulations. Okay. Compliance. Okay. So, is it the compliance side of things? So there's a section that I need to. I'll read through this section and hopefully it's the applicable bit. Formula One cars must comply with these regulations in their entirety at all times during a competition. Should a competitor introduce a new design or system or feel that any aspect of these regulations is unclear, clarification may be sought from the FIA Formula One technical department. If clarification relates to any new design or system, correspondence must include a full description of the design or system, drawings or schematics where appropriate, the competitor's opinion concerning the immediate implications on other parts of the car of any proposed new design, the competitor's opinion concerning any possible long-term consequences or new developments which may come from using such new designs or system, the precise ways in which the competitor feels the new design or system will enhance the performance of the car. So when we get the strap-on fanboy coming here and go, Mercedes cheated, they had DAS. No, prior to that season, Mercedes had an idea of dual axis steering, which was the utilization of the steering wheel to adjust effectively the tracking angle of those front wheels. The FIA looked at the regulations and say, well, there's nothing that prevents that. The regulations will say that those steered wheels of the car must be controlled with the steering wheel of the car. You can't use an additional control mechanism such as a button or a switch to alter the position of those steered wheels of the car. You have a steering wheel and you move the steering wheel and those front wheels move. There's nothing in those regulations that say you can't actually pull that steering wheel towards you, and by doing such, rather than those steered wheels be slightly angled in towards the center of the car, for example, or out away from the center of the car, by pulling the steering wheel, it changes that to them running in a straight line or adjusting the position of them, either the toe in or toe out angle of those wheels. Mercedes felt that by incorporating that feature in their car, it would mean that when traveling, for example, behind a safety car, they could adjust the tracking angle, the toe in or toe out of those wheels of the car, and it might maintain more temperature in those tyres by doing so. Hence, give them an advantage when that car comes to resume racing because the temperature of the tyres is already in a better position. When you look at the original regulations for that season, that wasn't illegal. That's still utilising the steering wheel to adjust the position of those steering wheels, those steered wheels. Not illegal. Okay? It's not in a loophole or grey area. It's just the fact is You're allowed to use the steering wheel to adjust the position of those front wheels. Mercedes used that steering wheel in a different axis rather than the rotational axis to move their wheels from the right to the left, as we know a car steers. They pulled the steering wheel towards them in a push-pull motion, and that adjusted the position of those steering wheels in a different manner. Okay, there's nothing preventing them from doing that. That wasn't illegal. The FIA did not make them remove that because it wasn't contravening the rules. They allowed Mercedes to participate, to compete with that design because it wasn't illegal. They only outlawed it at the end of the season because they didn't want the other teams to have to go to the expense of actually having to develop the same technology in their cars. So they prevented the one team that developed it from utilising it anymore. But you couldn't deprive them of that advantage for something that they had innovated. So new systems or technologies. A new system, procedure or technology not specifically covered by these regulations, but which is deemed permissible by the FIA Formula One Technical Department, will only be admitted until the end of the championship during which it is introduced. Following this, the Formula One Commission will be asked to review the technology concerned, and if they feel it adds no value to Formula One in general, it may be specifically prohibited by the FIA. Any team whose technology is prohibited in this way will then be required to publish full technical details of the relevant system or procedure. So it's secretive. If you develop something that is legal, then why should you have to give the details away to another team? That's your development that you've actually managed to benefit from. Well, good on you. But if it's then outlawed by the sport, well, make the details public of what it was you were doing. So, strap on fanboy. That was DAS. That's how that worked. That wasn't illegal. If this asymmetric valve, this valve that's within the Red Bull braking system, which there are rumours that this is what they are using. If they are using that, and what it does, it produces an asymmetric braking force to those brakes of that Red Bull car from one side of the car to the other. That is illegal, and I'm going to go through that bit now with section 11. I'm going to go through on the regulations of this version of them first, and then we'll show you what they amended it to. So, Article 11, brake system, brake circuits and pressure distribution. With the exception of a power unit, all cars must be equipped with only one brake system. So what they mean with the power unit is this notion of engine braking. All right, your engine and transmission can slow your car down. All right, but we're talking about the actual braking circuit where you press the brake pedal and the brake pads are forced against the brake discs of that car to brake your car in that manner. You can only have one system that does that. This system must consist of one pedal which operates two master cylinders. On the outlet side of the master cylinders, the system must comprise of two hydraulic circuits. One circuit from one master cylinder to operate the two front wheels, one circuit from the other master cylinder to operate the two rear wheels. So you have separate circuits, one for the front, one for the rear, so that there can be different forces going to the front of the car and to the back of the car. But also, if one of those circuits fails, you are not left with a car without brakes, because if you've only got one circuit and it fails, your car has no brakes. If one of those circuits fails, you still have the other circuit which you can use to slow your car down. Okay? The rear brake control system described in Article 11.6 will be regarded as part of circuit that operates the rear wheels, and this is the adjustable part. This system must be designed so that if a failure occurs in one circuit, the pedal will still operate the brakes in the other. Okay, so it's saying that only the rear, when you're adjusting this brake balance, okay, where it must be designed whereby you've still got two separate circuits, and if one of these circuit fails, the other still operates. The diameters of the master cylinders acting on the two rear wheels and the two front wheels must be within 2 millimeters of each other and have the same available travel. The same principle must be applied in multi-stage master cylinder designs. The brake system must be designed so that within each circuit the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. Okay, so you have to apply. So I'll just go through that again. The brake system must be designed so that within each circuit, so the front circuit or the back circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. So basically, your brake pads are squeezing together on each disc with equivalent force on either the front of the car or the back of the car. Yeah? That squeeze that your caliper is squeezing onto them brake pads and squeezing that brake disc with has to be the same force on the right hand side to the left hand side on the front axle, and at the rear of the car the force going through the right hand side has to be the same going through the left hand side. It's quite clear. Okay, it's worded like this all the way through. There's no grey area, there's no Red Bull interpretation of it. It's quite clear. Any powered device other than the system referred to in Article 11.6, which is capable of altering the configuration or affecting the performance of any part of the brake system, is forbidden. Any change to or modulation of the brake system whilst the car is on the track must be made by the driver's direct physical input or by the system referred to in Article 11.6 and may not be preset. So the brake bias cannot be interfered with by the telemetry from the pit wall. They have to tell the driver to adjust the setting from within the car. It cannot be done electronically preset, and it must be direct physical input by the driver. You can't have a G, okay, a G force affected braking distribution effect. And you're certainly not allowed to do it that affects one side of the car differently to the other. So you can't have it that as the G load of the car loads up, it impacts the front to rear brake balance distribution. Okay, for example, as you as you put your brakes on, you can't have the brakes loading up differently and that brake load up being then dissipated through the system. So, for example, initially the front brake discs biting harder, but as your car slows, the brake force then kind of seeping rearwards. Not that you'd want to do that, but you can't. This is the example I'm trying to give you to say that you can't have, as the G affects the impact on the car, you can't allow that then to alter the brake force as it as it kind of can be balanced from front to rear of that car. Didn't word that very well, but hopefully some of you will follow what I said there. Brake calipers, and the reason I'm reading through all of these, it's important, and it relates back to what Tactical Rab said. Brake calipers are defined as the parts of the braking system outside of the survival cell, other than brake disc, brake pads, caliper, piston, components directly associated with the system referred to in Article 11.6, brake hoses and fittings, which are stressed when subjected to the braking pressure. Bolts or studs which are used for attachment are not considered to be part of the brake calipers. All brake calipers must be made from aluminium materials with a modulus of elasticity no greater than 80 GPa. No more than 2 attachments may be used to secure each brake caliper to the car. No more than 1 caliper with a maximum of 6 pistons is permitted on each wheel. The section of each caliper piston must be circular. So they're all pretty straightforward. No more than 1 brake disc is permitted on each wheel, which must have the same rotational velocity as the wheel it is connected to. So that's important. No more than one brake disc is permitted on each wheel, which must have the same rotational velocity as the wheel it is connected to. So you cannot have a floating brake disc that rotates at a different speed to the wheel. Okay, because that as well would be a driving aid. That would enable you to apply braking force and yet the wheel keep rotating to a different speed to what you are applying braking force to that braking caliper at. You're not allowed to do it. All of these regulations, they all work in conjunction with one another. They're all saying the same thing. There is no grey area. There is no loophole. The intention of what this is designed to achieve is backed up multiple times. Okay, you can't get around this by doing this. That is what that regulation is saying. No more than one brake disc is permitted on each wheel, which must have the same rotational velocity as the wheel it's connected to. All discs must have a maximum thickness of 32 millimeters. The diameters of the discs are between 325 mm and 330 mm for the front, and between 275 and 280 for the rear. The minimum diameter of cooling holes in the discs is 3 millimeters. No more than 2 brake pads are permitted on each wheel, so you can only have one brake pad either side of that disc. Cooling holes are not permitted in the pads. Brake pressure modulation. Okay, no braking system may be designed to prevent wheels from locking when the driver applies pressure to the brake pedal. So you're not allowed anti-lock brakes. Okay. No braking system may be designed to increase, and part of that is when you apply braking force equally, then you might get one side of the car that is more loaded up than the other. If there is a greater weight going through one side of the car due to the G, due to the loading, then you are applying braking force, and if you've loaded, say, the front left tyre up with a load of weight and force, you apply braking force to that, and that will want to continue rotating. Okay, the inertia of the car will want to keep rotating against that braking force on the disc. The unloaded side, well, because it's unloaded, when you squeeze the brake pads against the disc, well, that might quite easily stop that wheel. Yeah, that will lock that wheel on that side of the car. Whereas the loaded side, you'll need more force to actually cause that one to lock up, because the loaded side will actually need more friction with which to grab hold of that disc to actually stop it. That's the way that the forces of this work. So you can't design your braking system for it to not lock in that manner. That's driver skill. That's your driver's skill in not ensuring that those brakes don't lock in those conditions. It's not it's ensuring that you're not just designing in a driver aid, which means that the driver doesn't have to drive with that level of skill. And this is what the regulations are there for. This is what they mean. This is the purpose of them. No braking system may be designed to increase the pressure in the brake calipers above that achieved by the driver applied force to the pedal under all conditions. So some cars you get brake assist. If the car detects that you need a greater braking force than what the driver is applying in a given situation, then the car will do that for you. You're not allowed to incorporate that design on a Formula One car. Okay, BAS. If you've got an old Mercedes car, you've got something called BAS, brake assist, right? And that where the car detects something and it applies a greater braking force when the driver hasn't put in as much as what is required. Liquid cooling. Liquid cooling for the brakes is forbidden. Rear brake control system, and this is the bit that can be adjusted. This is the notion of brake bias. The pressure in the rear brake circuit may be provided by a power control system, provided that. So this is where you can use a powered system to adjust the bias. Okay, and that bias is the differential between the force applied to that front axle and the force being applied to that back axle of the car. The driver brake pedal is connected to a hydraulic master cylinder that generates a pressure source that can be applied to the rear braking circuit if the powered system is disabled. So if the power system failed, it still operates as a braking system. The power system is controlled by the control electronics described in Article 8.3. So this is what I'm assuming that means that what the driver then manually selects what it's going to be. B-bar, select it, and they'll give them the setting to select. So, supply of these items, okay, and this is 11.7, so it's saying who has to supply those articles, and that is the end of those brake regulations on the braking system of the F1 car. Now, if I switch over to, let's see if we've got the right one. Is this the right one? I've got a few tabs open. I always tend to do this. Have I got the right one? If I've got the right one, no, it's probably the wrong one. It must be the other side. Be this one. Yeah, issue 7. So issue 7, published on the 31st of July 2024. When we go down to the braking section, which will be down here. Keep going. This is why I paused the video to get down there last time, but I'm showing you that I'm going down there this time. We'll do it this way. There's a lot of pages, but most people are not going to read them. But you don't need to read them all. We're just talking about this one section. We're talking about the braking section, and we can read through it. And as long as you've got a bit of basic knowledge and somebody explains to you what it means, it's not that difficult. So we'll get there. Steering, suspension uprights, wheel rims, okay? Tyres, tyre specification, wheel attachment and retention, dimensions. Braking system, Article 11. So this is on this latest version. Okay, and here it is. This is the amendment. 11.1.2. The brake system must be designed so that within each circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. All right? They act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. The forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. So within each circuit, so we've got the front circuit and the back circuit, okay? Front circuit, 2 front brakes. Within that circuit, the magnitude of braking force is the same going to the front right wheel, to the front brake disc on the right hand side and the front brake disc on the left hand side. That magnitude of force has to be the same. Where it says on a given brake disc, what this is saying is when you squeeze those pads together, because you've got a pad either side of that disc, and the way that they're squeezed together is you usually have one that's fixed and you have pistons forcing one pad to compress it against, well, to compress it towards the other pad with this disc being trapped in the middle. Okay? They might exist on Formula One cars where you've got pistons either side that are both forcing each pad onto the disc. On a standard road car, you have the outer pad which is fixed and the inner pad is pushed with a piston onto the disc, and the net effect of these two pads being pushed together by one being forced towards the other one is that they clamp against the disc, causing that frictional force which ultimately stops that brake disc rotating. Say in a Formula One car, whether you've got pistons on either side that are at the same time pushing those discs onto the pad? I very much doubt it, because the complexity of that and the weight that it would add would probably would outweigh the performance advantage you get in doing so. So I very much would imagine that the brakes on a Formula One car would do exactly what the same would do on a road car, which means the outer pad is essentially fixed, and you've got the pistons that force the inner pad outwards, essentially squeezing the pads together and trapping in between it that rotating brake disc, stopping that brake disc ultimately, and that's your braking force. What this regulation says, the black part that always was, okay, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. If Red Bull tried to say, but you said on a given, it's quite clear that within each circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude. Yeah, they've now clarified this and added the so-called clarification in purple. Any system or mechanism which can produce systematically or intentionally asymmetric braking torques for a given axle is forbidden. Yeah, you didn't need to say that. That's already covered. That's already covered in these regulations. As I just went through them braking regulations and explained what each one of those was meaning and what it was actually, the context of what those regulations are achieving and why it is that they're written that way and why it is that they're written there as a regulation, because they don't want you having driver aids. You don't need that bit that's in purple. Any system or mechanism which can produce systematically or intentionally asymmetric braking torques for a given axle is forbidden. Everything that was already written there covered that, and yet the FIA are telling the world by publishing this, oh, we've had to clarify something here. Well, why have you had to clarify it? Was one of your teams doing it? Is that why you feel you've had to clarify something? Was somebody actually doing that? Who was doing that? Because at the Brazilian Grand Prix of 2021, you told us what Mercedes were doing wrong. And when Mercedes went through, well, these are the potential issues, you didn't accept any of that. You didn't accept any of those mitigating potential factors. No, they're the rules. You're going to get penalised. Who have the FIA told us may have been intentionally, okay, and systematically invoking a mechanism that produced asymmetric braking torques? Who would have done that to make you have to write this into the regulations, the FIA? Oh, you're not going to tell us, are you? You're not going to tell us. Strange that. Strange that the FIA, the sports governing body, aren't going to tell us which team in that sport has done something that made them have to write and incorporate this in this latest version of the regulations, which was published, and I'll go right to the top of this again, on the 31st of July 2024. So that was issue 7. Issue 6 was published on the 30th of April 2024. This is a 2024 F1 calendar. 2nd of March, 9th of March, 24th of March, 7th of April, 21st of April. So there were 5 races before that publication by the FIA anyway. 5 races, this one. 5 races before the 30th of April 2024. That was issue 6. But they've only amended this regulation, issue 7, as of the 31st of July. So if that's the 31st of July, well, up until the 31st of July, well, they've amended the regulations after the Belgian Grand Prix. 14 races down. And yet they tell us, It was after China that Red Bull stopped using this device. It was after China that Red Bull started using this device. Well, that device, we've got the Bahrain Grand Prix won by Max Verstappen, the Saudi Grand Prix won by Max Verstappen, the Australian Grand Prix where that brake exploded and Max Verstappen retired, the Japanese Grand Prix won by Max Verstappen, the Chinese Grand Prix won by Max Verstappen. Well, if that device was being used in those races, well, that car is illegal and you need to be disqualified. But then Max Verstappen has won the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix after setting pole for the Miami Grand Prix as well. I don't know what happened to Max in Miami. Can't remember. Don't really care. We've got Max Verstappen won the Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen won the Spanish Grand Prix. We can tell that at the Hungarian Grand Prix, it didn't appear to be functioning, did it? How many races was Max Verstappen utilising that device, if it was being utilised, in that Red Bull car? How many races should Red Bull be penalised for? Should have their cars disqualified for? The FIA aren't going to tell us because we can't trust them. Red Bull aren't going to tell us because we can't trust them because they're pathological liars. They went into the Abu Dhabi Steward's Appeal and told pathological lies. Newey, Horner, Wheatley lied to the FIA stewards who lied about the rules of the sport. The FIA then did a report into the Abu Dhabi. It's all lies. They are all pathological liars. But what is the media telling us about this? Well, not that one, this one. The BBC. Andrew Benson. Now, Andrew Benson, he told us about when there's rumours going on in Formula One. Andrew Benson tells us about the rumours. He told us about the Christian Horner situation. He told us about, insider sources say, BBC sources say, BBC sources. Inside. Andrew's got his sources. Well, what are they saying about this situation, Andrew? How to follow the Dutch Grand Prix on the BBC. What are you, Andrew? A salesman. You're just selling the event, aren't you? Salesman. You're not telling us the truth about this. Instead, you tell us about Horner has appeal dismissed. So let's have a look at this one. Horner complaint has appeal dismissed. So this girl that's complained of misconduct from Christian Horner, Red Bull have cleared Horner with their independent barrister that Red Bull employed to clear him. Okay. She'd logged her complaint. Christian's always denied the allegations of wrongdoing, but Christian also denied breaching the budget as well. So we know that we can't trust you, Christian. And another independent lawyer has now conducted the appeal against that decision that was upheld. And Red Bull has accepted and adopted the conclusions of that lawyer, which Red Bull also would have paid for. The complaint has been the complainant has been suspended by Red Bull since March and has previously reported the reason given to the employee was she had been dishonest. So there you go. You're happy to report that this employee had been dishonest, Andrew, aren't you? The complainant has been suspended by Red Bull since March. BBC Sport has previously reported the reason given to the employee which she has been dishonest. So Andrew Benson will happily parrot a narrative that this employee is being dishonest, yet Andrew Benson cannot identify that Christian Horner is dishonest, Adrian Newey is dishonest, Jonathan Wheatley is dishonest. And there's evidence of them being dishonest. But Andrew Benson has never gone through that FIA appeal and evidenced them being dishonest. Instead, Andrew likes to go, Christian said this. Christian said that. And what do you think? In asking Andrew Benson in the comments section with Andrew's Q&A, send us your question. Salesman, Absolute salesman. And what have the contracted broadcasters got to say about it? Sky Sports F1. So this is their list of latest videos. Let's see what Sky Sports are saying about this brake issue, this brake controversy from Red Bull. Okay, because the Red Bull team, it's doing the rounds on social media, and obviously Red Bull, Sky Sports, the contracted broadcaster of the regime, they will always talk about this, won't they? They'll tell the fans what's going on, what's going viral. F1's viral moments of the summer so far. This has been outstanding. The story of F1. Who are Alpine and Audi's new team bosses? Well, one of the Audi ones, the corrupt Jonathan Wheatley. Karun Chandok. It's been an adventure. How McLaren became championship contenders. I don't have a driver challenge. Zach Brown. So what you're saying is, Sky Sports, you're not saying anything about it. Sky Sports aren't saying anything about it. But Formula One president Stefano Domenicali says the sport will never gag anyone. The sport will never gag anybody. Nobody has to comply with the narrative, do they, Andrew? You know, by Andrew Benson, the chief F1 writer. Oh, the sport will never gag anybody. FIA enforces new measure to curb abuse against officials. Okay, we're not going to gag anybody, but you're not allowed to say anything because it's the officials who are getting abused. You're not allowed to say anything that makes us look bad. You're not allowed to say anything. So basically, you are, aren't you? You're going to gag the teams and the drivers from talking about this Red Bull situation, aren't you? Which team has done something that's made you amend the regulations to clarify it to all other teams that they're not allowed to do that? So FIA, which team did that? Are you going to tell us? Are you going to tell us what prompted you to have to add in this amendment to the regulations, which were clearly explicit and clear in the first place, about this notion of you're not allowed asymmetric braking, you're not allowed driver aid braking? It's not allowed. It's pretty clear. Oh, but we need to clarify that. But no, serious implications of this trend. Because it causes harassment and abuse towards the officials. But you're quite happy for the abuse of people who are telling the truth in social media. You're quite happy for the abuse that they're getting, that are caused by you, the FIA, caused by your lies, caused by your corruption, caused by your fraud, that's perpetrated this abuse of us. No, you quite like letting that burn, don't you? But you're the victims, aren't you, the FIA? Oh yeah, we're not going to let the these people, these drivers and these teams say things which result in the abuse of the FIA. Oh, so if anybody says that the FIA are allowing Red Bull to get away with something, will that cause the FIA to get abused? Oh, so the FIA make a rule saying, oh, you're not allowed to say that. That's called totalitarianism. That's an abusive regime. That's a mafia-run, corrupt regime. You're not fit to run anything. You're not fit to even run a raffle. This is the sports governing body. You're utterly disgraceful. And you're corrupt. You got a problem with me saying that you're corrupt? Take me to court. I will prove that you are corrupt. I may not be right about this Red Bull situation. I cannot evidence it. I cannot take that component off of that car that was alleged to be in breach and take it apart and say, here is this device that is producing that effect. None of us can. Red Bull aren't going to admit it. the FIA aren't going to tell us the truth. All we can do is look at what has actually taken place. And that is that Red Bull car that was head and shoulders above everything else on the grid now isn't. In 2022, those teams did not catch that Red Bull car. In 2023, those teams did not catch that Red Bull car. In 2024, that Red Bull car started off with at least that same performance advantage that it had in those 2022 and 2023 seasons. And now it's not performing the same. Are you telling me that it's just due to the developments that the other teams have managed to develop to make them catch up? I don't think so. Max Verstappen isn't handling that car as well around the circuits. You can't tell me, oh, it's because Adrian Newey was a genius in 2023, 2022. Adrian Newey developed that 2024 car as well. He's lost his genius, has he? Oh, the reason that car handles so well and is so fast in a straight line is nothing to do with the engine. It's due to Adrian Newey's genius and Max Verstappen's driving, because Max Verstappen's adds 50 horsepower to the car just for being Max Verstappen, because he can pedal it as well to make it go even faster. Because that's Super Max for you. No, it's the power of the engine that gives it its straight line speed. Okay, and if it can carry more speed into corners without locking those brakes up, allowing Max Verstappen to brake later than other cars. Oh, he likes it handling on the nose, we're all told. All these Max Verstappen fluffers, they'll tell you, oh, Max Verstappen likes a very pointy car. It's set up for the way Max likes to drive it. Well, it's got the driver aids that Max needs in order to be able to brake late and make it stick around the corner, rather than Calhoun's, when he didn't have it in 2021. Oh, and it's understeer, understeer, understeer. Funny that that car carries on in a straight line and doesn't go around the corner when you carry too much speed into the corner. But when you've got this device on your brakes, which allows those wheels to still have some braking force without locking those tyres, it allows those, whilst under braking, allowing those outer wheels to rotate at a greater speed than the inner wheels, because that's what needs to happen when you go around a corner. Oh, Max Verstappen's the greatest driver you've ever seen, when he's got a car that allows that. Yeah. Yes. It's a narrative. It's a narrative. He's not that good. He really isn't that good. Oscar Piastri is a better driver than Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri is a better driver than Max Verstappen. But even he is no Lewis Hamilton. Anyway, thank you for your time. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and importantly, share it. What you're going to be hearing from this channel, if you've recently subscribed, is evidence of everything that took place at Abu Dhabi 2021 that we can evidence. And we have the evidence because they defrauded the entire watching public in front of our very eyes. And then they just lied to everybody about it. They convinced everybody of their lies. And people's ignorance made them believe them lies. And the strap-on fanboy will jump up in the comment section to defend them lies rather than be able to accept the truth. And I'll just take you through the wording of the regulations, the purpose of the regulations, what it actually means, what's really going on, and compare that with what you're told and what Brundle says and what Crofty says and what they did and what the stewards did and what everybody has done subsequently, what the governing body has done. The entire thing was a contrivance. It was all fraudulent. What every team did. The entire thing was a fraud. And it will unravel. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for your time. And actually, before I press stop, thank you for your continued support. I do appreciate it. Thank you.